Hello, lovely people, and welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie, and this is Evolved Chit. It's my little corner of the world where I like to talk about spirituality, metaphysical stuff, universal laws, and psychology. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about, actually, it's a question I hear probably from every person I talk to who follows my channel and people I've coached. And that question is, what do I do when my twin flame returns? And then I'm going to try and answer this other question along the way, and that is, and how long do I have to balance my energy for? So those are really good questions, especially the energy balancing one. So I'll share with you my personal experiences doing this, but in this video, I'm actually going to use a conversation I had recently with a client to help illustrate this as well. And with the permission of my client, I want to thank you. I'm going to call him Ed. Ed, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity just to share your story's context, because I think it helps other people relate as well. So in Ed's situation, Ed believes he is on a twin flames journey. This is actually someone he's known almost his entire life. And they had gone through just, life changes that based on where they were at their age. They both went off to college and hadn't connected after, ever since they went off to college, other than like through social media. And then over the last couple of years, they've reconnected, and there's definitely been like a flirtation, even a friends with benefits situation that was going on for a while and then stopped. And but they've had interactions, and more so than just being friends or casual acquaintances. And then over the last few months, because of the nature of their situation, they have to interact with each other for professional purposes. It's the friends with benefits thing kind of fell off and all this other stuff, but there's definitely what seems to be an interest from her in Ed. So Ed's confused. Let's just put it that way. And Ed was trying to get some clarity, and recently they had a discussion. They got together. They had a really wonderful evening. A lot of beautiful things were shared and said, and Ed left that night and went home, and he was just like all blissed out, and and really happy, and felt validated. And then, an hour goes by, 2 hours go by, and that feeling turns to like anxiety and ruminating. And so I asked Ed, I'm like, is this something that, is this the first time you're noticing this? Is this something that happens on a regular basis? And he said, this happens on a regular basis. So I was like, okay, good. Now we're going to identify a pattern. So that's the good part about all of this. When you're practicing the self-inquiry, which is all I'm going to share with you, what I did with Ed was help facilitate this. Identifying that there's a pattern is really good. So we talked about that, and he identified that it's the very same thing. He's really happy. He's excited. This is wonderful. And then they part ways. And what you could say, the validation is gone. And now he's left with nothing but his inner world. And his thoughts can go one way or another. And usually when it has to do with her, and when they're not together, he's not being validated, they go in a dark way and an anxious way. So we just talked about, what are those feelings? What is that narrative? And understanding, like, where was he at that night when he got home and he was ruminating? So why did you go from this place of this person had said what they said to you, and that made you feel very happy, to now this person's not responding to you even just a few days later? So the emotions, what are they? And how are they creating your inner narrative? What are they doing with that soundtrack, that the thoughts that are going on? What was he projecting at her? or at the situation in general, or at himself. And this is the inner world. This is the vibration. This is our vibration, our frequency. So he said he was afraid that she was going to not think he was good enough or attractive enough or make enough money, all those things that go through, can go through a person's head of like inadequacy. And then our story kind of plays out around it. Well, that's what he was doing. And he's like, this isn't going to last. She's just going to see that I'm this, I'm that, I'm not enough, like this is his narrative. And then what he had realized is that whenever he would have an interaction with her, be it like, since she had returned over the last like 1.5, 2 years, whether it was the professional interaction or whether it was just like a regular, everyday interaction, friends interaction, he was playing this narrative after they parted. So it was like the dopamine hit. Here's the drug. The twin flame is the interaction with the twin flame is kind of like the drug. You're like the dopamine hit, the surge, the energy goes like through the roof because he felt so validated and seen, and and he really loves interacting with her. He finds her attractive and wonderful and everything. And then later, and he goes on that narrative. So, okay, here's the cycle. He said some things that were really important. He said, she's going to think I'm not good enough. Okay. Well, why? Why do you think you're not good enough to be in a relationship with her? And that's where we practice another layer of self-inquiry. And he expressed feelings about why he felt he might not be good enough. And so we could take those limiting beliefs and we could kind of like scratch them out. I was like, I don't know you really well, but just based on what you shared with me, and I kind of helped him demystify or debunk his own beliefs that he was telling himself that are not true. And again, I don't know him very well and I don't know his twin flame at all, but it's like, from what I'm seeing of you, why would you think those things about yourself? So that's a whole other thing. And I'm not a therapist. I'm just like, that's like, there are things that people need to talk about that are like deep, dark stuff and help you unravel things. You definitely need to be sure you're seeking the right professional help. But practicing self-inquiry can help you identify what kind of things you may need to help you with your care. So, Ed's like, these are things I know that I can manage. I know it's just my narrative. I know it's just from, we went down that rabbit hole. Well, where's it from? That was something that helped me. I could identify and label it. I was like, oh my God, when I root it back to like a certain experience or experiences like it, I'm like, oh, it's just stupid shit. And that's what I say to me. It's my stupid shit. I would never say that to anyone else, but usually it's just that story that we've told ourselves based on like a heartbreak or experience or what we experienced in childhood. Then that becomes our narrative. That narrative creates an auto response. And since I've been interacting with people and doing these coaching sessions, it's very interesting. I can see like how that cycle happens. And this is where I like to just help you like point out where you're having that break in your thinking. It's like, it's where your thoughts can go one way or the other. So why not conspire for your good? That's what I said to Ed. I'm like, you have all these great things going on in your life. And Ed, you seem like a really nice person. So I'm rooting for you. But why would you tell yourself otherwise? So again, this is where that narrative comes into play. And we didn't get too deep into the situations that Ed had identified, but a lot of it started in his like teen years when he had experienced something with a girl he was interested in, and it didn't go the way he wanted to go. But that was an experience he could root it back to. So we identified it had to do with a form of rejection. So then there were a couple of other experiences over the last decade where he had shown up in certain ways in connections because he didn't want to be rejected. And so he then had to adapt. When his twin flame came in, it really showed him that, just in our conversation, we were talking about this. He's like, it's mirroring at me those feelings, those times of inadequacy. And then like the inner child, the wounded inner child stuff kind of comes in, and that's where like the shadowy stuff, it comes into play. And we get anxious, or we project, or we act out, or we do things that are out of character, or whatever. So he was seeing his pattern now, and what that was causing, and that this was just an auto response. I'm like, just like that experience, let this conversation be a pivot for you, and that now you realize you can change your inner script. You can change that narrative, and that narrative will help you change your response to what's going on in the world. This is what I did with my twin flame, because like Ed, and probably every person I talk to, it's a very similar pattern with the relationship dynamic. I had the same thing, things that I might not be good enough for another person. But my twin flame was showing me is that, yes, I am good enough for another person. It's like he wasn't rejecting me. It's just that I was rejecting me. So that sounds weird, but really, like, that's, and what is happening with Ed too. Ed is rejecting himself, so he doesn't have to get hurt. And this is where attachment style stuff comes into play, and was hugely helpful for me in identifying my push-pull energy, and what I was doing to reject myself and my feelings. So I don't know Ed's attachment style, but I really encouraged him to go check out the free quiz at the Personal Development School, because that was so helpful for me, and allowed me to see how my energy was showing up. And then I did the self-inquiry route, and I could see where that was rooted in. I could see what I told myself because of those situations. And it's like, yeah, those things may have happened to me, but I'm an adult now. Some of those things happened a long time ago. I'm an adult now, and I can choose how I want to look at that and how I want to use it. That's alchemy. So we're taking that energy and we're deciding to do something else with it. So, when you hear those things like on these like spiritual sites and books and things like that, and we talk about alchemy and alchemizing energy, that's what you're doing. That's energy. How are you like transmuting it and say, nope, that's where I end this today. I'm empowered now, and I am moving forward with my life, whether this person is in it or not. And that's what I said to Ed too. We have to stop breaking our own hearts. And yes, this person we may believe this person is wonderful and beautiful and this and that, but if we're hurting ourselves or they're hurting us, then we've got to figure out, like, how do you deal with this? So that's what this mirroring is showing us. It hurts because it's showing us like sides of us that that may be rooted in our pain body. And how do we transcend that, alchemize that energy, and continue to ascend and elevate and experience what we're here to experience, so we can cut out that noise, that inner narrative that's just our mind, just our psyche, and allow us to connect with our higher self. So that's where we're able to be in soul. It's where we're able to be the observer and tap into the wisdom of our higher self, so we can be in alignment with our mission. And our mission is just like, if we believe we're energetic beings or spiritual beings having a human experience, that's all that is. That's what the mission is. And just allowing you to live in your authenticity and experience life to the fullest. And being in these other states, though, where we might be in an anxious state because of things that had happened to us previously, and they're creating an auto response that's giving back to us like unhealthy situations or experiences, then we have to stop and say, okay, why is this happening? And that's what I did. So I went through all of that, and I could see, just like Ed, I could see where my inner narrative was telling a story that was not true, that was not here. It was rooted in something that may have been true, but then I told myself, when a situation like this comes up, this is what happens, this is how you have to be. And then in a lot of ways, like that auto response, it was not with my best interest in mind. So just like Ed, he had to identify that. He had to see, and we did this all in just under an hour, and like unraveling this one pattern. And he could see that where his response was keeping him stuck. he could see how it was contributing to this like push pull that really, he said it felt like it's palpable. You could feel it between him and her. So I found that really interesting. But they had gotten together recently, and they just had a very wonderful conversation, and expressed their how they feel about each other. And they, after that, they had a really wonderful evening. They parted ways. Ed went home, and he was just all blissed out and so happy, and he felt so seen and validated. And as the night went on, he's up, and but now it's not so blissful. He's in his thoughts, and the good thoughts then go right into a negative thought. A good thought goes into, wow, she's really into me and this and that. And it goes to, why hasn't she texted me? Well, it's 1 a.m. So, but like he could see now that when he was going through his narrative, he could then logically be like, well, that's not reasonable for me to think. I'm sitting here lying in bed and thinking about her. Why would she just think to text me? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. She's probably asleep. So again, like Ed's narrative had him like ruminating and projecting and fearful, and maybe even like just throwing a little frustration her way. And so when he could see that, he was like, oh my God, like, why am I doing that? I really, really love this person. Like he didn't realize how his inner narrative and then that automatic response was like victimizing him, and in turn victimizing that energetic dynamic with his twin flame. So if we believe in the that the twin flames theory is what I call it, and that we are energetic beings, and in order to incarnate in human form, we had to split, and one part of that energy into one human form, and then the other part went into another human form. And now you believe that if you met this person, that means that you're having a shared incarnation with that other part of your energy, of your soul. So then if you're thinking and feeling those things, like if we're a shared energy with this person, then they must be feeling them too, right? But maybe in their own way. So, or however that may show up for them and feed their narrative. So 1 a.m. is rolling around, and Ed is up and ruminating, and he needs to know, where is this going? So his anxiety has got him on, like the volume up high, and he needs answers. So he's typing like, a novel of a text, and he did share the text with me. And if Ed is, the push energy and his twin flame is the pull energy, I would imagine she really pulled when she read that message, because he basically was saying to her, like, I need to know where this is going. And she responded the next morning. And so Ed was up for a while that night, and she responded the next morning, and it was a very short response. And they haven't really spoken since then, and that was a few days ago. So Ed is like freaking out, and why is this happening? What did I do? And so it was, it's the energy. So again, if we go back to the twin flames theory stuff, and we believe this, then that's what that is doing. So that projection is, and that fear, the automatic response has created that environment. So I haven't talked to Ed and heard from him in a few days since we spoke, but really curious to see, based on balancing his energy and the fact that they do have to interact with each other because of professional purposes, what his experience is like then. So this is the whole thing of self-inquiry, and going back to the question of what do I do when my twin flame returns, and how long do I have to balance this energy. If you think about where Ed was on, when he got home that night, and he was in that like blissed out state, and then within an hour his negativity, like the negative cycle, the negative story is ramping up. it completely wiped out that higher vibration Ed was feeling. But also I said to Ed, the fact that your, the response that you have, that feeling, was brought on because you spoke with her, and she told you how she felt about you, and you told her how you felt about her. Like, that's such a really wonderful, like, feeling of love. Why would you want to erase that? And I just wanted to know, like, is he invested in any kind of, relationship with her, be it a friendship, or if it does become a romantic relationship again, like, what is he invested in? So he needed to be clear on that. I said, because right now your inner narrative is sabotaging you. And again, going back to, if we believe in the energy stuff, then it's, it's affecting that energy as well. So this is where we needed to be clear on, like, what it is that he really is looking for in a partner in a romantic relationship. So I had suggested to him, if he, that he remove the person who is his twin flame. I was like, just remove her out of the story right now. Let's just talk about, before 2 years ago, you weren't even thinking about her necessarily. What kind of partner would you have been looking for? What would this connection be like? So I suggested to him that he get very clear on what kind of connection that he wants, and how he wants his partner to show up for him, and how he wants to feel in the relationship, and how he wants his partner to feel in the relationship too. As a partner, like, that's something that we want to be mindful of as well. Like, how do we want to be there for the person in our lives? So we were able to talk about these things as well, and he could see how they were a lot of the aspects of it were in contrast to how he was showing up in the dynamic with his twin flame, and how that experience was making him feel. So it's like, this is all she's showing you. She is mirroring to you these things for you to figure out and explore and determine how you want to continue to show up in your life. And this is where you can end that narrative and change it. I did the same thing. So I'm sharing with you guys what I did, and what I did with Ed, to help facilitate and balance that energy, balance that push-pull. And when I was doing this early on, I could see it, and I was like, all right, got this, balancing it. And then twin flame would come back in, things would be going well. I'm getting anxious, I'm not getting the validation I need. I would push off, or he would push off, or I would push and he would pull, so interesting to, when I talk to people, I see that dynamic as well. And then we can identify, like, what's causing that push. What's that inner narrative? And then looking at your self-concept. So for Ed, it's like, well, this is the kind of relationship that I want with someone. This is how I show up in that relationship for someone. And right now the situation with them is that they are friends. They're not in a romantic relationship yet. So I said, how do you just be a great friend and show up that way? And that is what I did too. It's like, let me just show up this way because this is who I am. And if the relationship goes one way or another, then that's fine. Then it's not a twin flames thing, and it's not for me, and I'm moving on. So that's the place I had to go to, because I was, playing that narrative. I was like, I wasn't caught up in the whole thing, like the twin flames thing, like, well, it has to be. It was just like, oh, well, this is really interesting. Let me research it. Like, I was caught up in it that way. So that was creating its own weird energy. But same for Ed, like, now that he thinks he's on a twin flames journey, he was kind of getting caught up in that narrative a little bit. So, and in a way, like, they say, the whoever, wrote about this, or, the channels, the coaches, whatever, they say that, what is meant for you will be. So if this is a part of that whole experience, then everything that is happening now is happening exactly as it should, and perfectly, even if it seems imperfect. This experience is very unique for each individual. And I have talked with people who, balanced out their energy and decided that their twin flame is in their life in some way, but not in a romantic way. They've decided to go down another path, be with another person, or remain single. And then I've talked to people who've married their twin flame and everything in between. So that was another thing too with Ed, and he was listening to a lot of the coaches and content out on YouTube because he just was trying to validate this experience and understand things. But, some channels he said he was following, and they're like, well, these people are talking about how they're in relationship with their twin flame. So he was comparing himself. I'm like, you can't compare yourself. Just be happy for them. Be happy for them that they're in that place and that they've met this person and they're happy in their relationship right now. So just use that as confirmation and not discouragement that, that you can balance out your stuff too, that you can be in a meaningful, wonderful, loving relationship as well. So this was really important to get clear on what Ed wanted to experience in his life. So when that comes up, he can choose how he wants to respond to it. So in this case, he could see how all of that stuff just stirred the pot, stirs that inner pot, that inner narrative. And, how do we get that going in a different direction? How do you get this to be an inner narrative that's conspiring for your good? It's conspiring for the good of others. And that creates a whole other vibe and frequency. And again, going back to the twin flames theory stuff and what we're told, in that we balance out that energy and we're, vibrating on our frequency, we attract in accordingly. We're magnetizing in accordingly. So if you're someone who is often, like Ed was, and myself too, I was having these thoughts along the way. If you're someone who's having thoughts that could be negative about yourself or another person, that's creating the inner narrative. And what you're doing often, or what you do frequently, is affecting your frequency. So if we're, complaining, or like the inner complaints, or we're ruminating or worrying or, projecting, it's often what we get more of. It's resistance. Whereas how do we, transmute that energy? Because a lot of it isn't necessary. It's just old stuff. It's just old stuff that's come up, and we can choose how we want to respond to it. So how do we take that and just be like, nope, not for me? But if it's important to recognize patterns, because sometimes we're just, in that groove, in that cycle, and it's created an auto response. And for a lot of people I've talked to, a lot of it's been rooted in their childhood trauma and the relationship dynamics and everything in their household. And for some people, some people are older than me and they've been going through this. So it's a part of this cycle, and it creates that inner narrative, which then creates an automatic response. And then we keep doing that. And this is just here to show you that you can choose now. You can choose and say, I'm not going to go down that path anymore. I'm changing what I'm thinking and doing and feeling, and that is changing my frequency. And what is meant to be for us will be based on just our vibes and what we're doing and how we're showing up in the world. So with Ed's situation, we talked about, what can he do now that he recognizes this pattern? And so we developed his self-concept out a bit, and I gave him some exercises and things to consider, and continuing to build that out. And then we also talked about things that he could do to help him when he picks up that he's ruminating and going down that inner narrative. Everyone's different. Like I said, I talk smack at mine. I'm like, oh, that's my shit, whatever, moving on, or, not today, Satan, things like that. Like, we all have our little mechanisms. I do stuff like that because it makes me laugh at the same time, which gives me perspective. So we talked about a self-care routine and things that he can do to help him when those things come up. And everyone's different. Ed has his stuff, that he likes to do to relax and help him reconnect and observe what's going on, so he can, get into soul. We hear that on in Twin Flames content. So he can be more of the observer. He can see how his inner narrative, that his psyche is creating that story, and then how he has adapted to that story, and then how he responded. And in this case, with his twin flame, it was, we had a really great time. He felt very validated, and he was like floating. And then, middle of the night, he's ruminating, scared, worried, afraid he's not enough and that this relationship's going to get away from him. So he needs answers. He sends her a really long text, basically demanding where this relationship's going. And then now he's, in that hangover phase, if you will, and having to like rebalance that energy, and he sees it. So it's pretty interesting to see that cycle. And again, like, I've gone through this, and these are the things that I did and still do when I get triggered by anything that helped me balance out my energy. This stuff is great, not just for like your twin flame experience, or it's good for everything, like how you just show up in life in general, your relationships with, your interpersonal relationships, your professional relationships, connections you have in your community, to the world, everything we're doing is a relating experience. So if it's an opportunity, like, this is all that this is showing us, is like what's going on. And the twin flame is like the mother of all mirrors. We're mirrored every day, all day long. And there's an opportunity for a response. So how are we choosing? And there are times where, I can actively, and I'm thinking of one right now, just within like the past 2 days. And again, it was like a work thing. Like, everything's really busy this time of year, and planning a trip, and have to do all this stuff, and everyone's on vacation. I'm like, what the hell, So, and, in my mind, like, I can go one of two ways. And now old me could have gone down the path of just like, there's always so much to do, and I don't have enough time to do it in. And why do I always have to do this stuff? And while a lot of that is true, so it's also, I can choose. I can say, I need help. So it's showing me, like, these things that get mirrored at us, it shows us how we can choose to respond. I can prioritize so much. I'm doing my best. There's only so much time in the day, and I can't work all day. I have to go live my life. Like, so these are the ways in which I allow myself to kind of talk myself off that ledge and balance out that, whatever anxiety is being stirred up in me. Whereas before, maybe I could have responded in a different way. And sometimes that could have been a way where I shut down, and just like checked out, or I could have been overly emotional, and maybe like sometimes, like, because I have a lot to do, I noticed a pattern that, like, I might not be as detail oriented as I like to be, and I do not like delivering sloppy work. That really bothers me. So it was like, one of the things in my self-concept was, how do I ask for help when I'm feeling overwhelmed? So I had to get really good at that. I had to ask my management to make sure that they were prioritizing for me, because I have to prioritize for like 15 people I have oversight on. So it can be overwhelming. So it's just showing you how our push-pull energy can show up in all sorts of things, not just with our twin flame or romantic interest. It's everything, and how we're relating to everything and everyone around us. So understanding our inner world, practicing that self-inquiry, understanding how we relate to people in our connections, people we know, people we don't know. It's why I talk about understanding your attachment style. It was really helpful for me, and I recommended it to Ed, and I recommend to other people I talk to, and is that check out your attachment style. You can do the quiz on the Personal Development School, and they also have a lot of great content out there. Once you know your attachment style, a lot of great content out there to help you better understand like how that attachment style operates. And then for me, it was really eye-opening, and clients I've talked to who have gone on and used this tool, and they've shared with me like how it's helped them. It's helped them identify their push-pull energy patterns. So in that way, that's self-inquiry. And right now, Personal Development School, they always have like a free trial going on, so you can access their site, and it's a lot of like PDF content that you can read and use, and pre-recorded content as well. It's a really great resource. And then it does go to like a monthly subscription model. So But a week is a good amount of time to go in and check out some of that content. And there's their channel. They put a ton of content out for free on YouTube and talking about all these different elements and nuances. And it's been so helpful for me to just better understand energy, better understand even when I'm interacting with people in all sorts of ways, like how, like that their energy as well, and they got their own little world going on, and I don't know what's going on in that world, but how do I, just do my thing and honor, who they are, because most people are still trying to figure out their stuff too, right? So that's what's been so cool about this, is just like, that's the real gift, is seeing what I believe. And if you're into the twin flame stuff, then you must believe it too, that we are energy and that we are the observer. The mind is the computer, the body is the car. So the observer can choose. And for a very long time, many of us have been caught up in the computer, in the mind, the programming, the automatic response. So we can rewire, we can reprogram our computer, our mind. And this is where these exercises are really helpful in identifying where you are out of alignment with your higher self, and getting tapped into that source energy, that the God energy, the collective consciousness, being able to get that wisdom without it being clouded with our other perceptions. So then that allows us to be in soul and live our most authentic life. And again, they say that when we do this, we're balancing out our energy, and that is balancing out our vibration and elevating our frequency. And that is when we magnetize in our twin flame. So I didn't write it, but it is very compelling. And some of the things that I have experienced with the person I believe is my twin flame have just, make me wonder if this thing is really a thing, because there's been a lot of validation with these tools and techniques and stuff that this could very well be a thing. So what's really interesting about this too is, and I've never really talked a lot about, I've talked about the person who I believe is my twin flame a little bit, but I'd always wondered, like, when I was going through it, if, like, how he was feeling, like what was going on with him. And after like one of our like last separation periods, we had a very like deep conversation. And I can remember, like, I knew at that point, I was like, I want to tell him what's on, like I want to tell him these things, but I never really talked about twin flame stuff with him. And I still don't, like, I don't really use this term or talk all that much about it, but he shared with me that time, he's like, when we were in like a period of separation, it was like 3 months or 6 months or something. He's like, I think about you every day and multiple times a day. And he said, I always have known that I wanted this connection, but I just always felt like something was blocking me. And I just found that really interesting. So I was like, really? And I like inquired. So it was very interesting to hear that. And it had made me wonder, excuse me, it made me wonder too, like when I was in the throes of all this and researching everything, and I would hear like twin flame coaches say something similar to that, I was like, wow, like this is so weird, like that they would get that validation. And so it was really cool when I heard it too. And it showed me like this energy thing really could be a real thing. So why not take this knowledge that you have now and use it for your good, conspire for your good, have the thoughts, change that inner world so it's aligning with the kind of world that you want to experience. And developing your self-concept, it gives you like a starting point. So when the inner world stuff is going haywire, you can always come back to your self-concept and say, no, this is who I am. And this stuff is old stuff. It's trauma. And those experiences are very valid. These things happen to us. People experiencing deep, awful things, and it creates our trauma. And that creates our response. So I can only hope that when one recognizes this, that we choose to want to do something about it, so we can then move on in our lives and live a more fulfilling life rather than playing out an old narrative. So doing the self-concept stuff, it helps you when you're stuck. And that's what I would do. I have like whiteboards in my house. I like to draw and write things out. And I'm very visual. So I would write on my, like the whiteboards in my home, like my self-concept. So when stuff would come up and I would be like, no, that's not who I am. That's who I am. And so much of the old stuff that was coming up was just all, like the first half of my life stuff, the trauma, the relationships, the things I endured, the things I allowed because of who I was, and then what all of that created. And then boom, in my 40s, like it all blew up. And then I met the person who I believe is my twin flame, and it really blew up. So it was just very interesting, when I see and share Ed's experiences, and I related to the ones that I had as well. It's just it's very interesting to see how our inner world really creates our reality. And I'm still me. Like, I've changed that inner narrative a lot, and I'm still me. I'm still the same person. I still wear the same clothes. Well, some clothes are different. I'm still me, still doing my thing. Like it's life changing in many ways, and yet not. It's just everyday life. But the magic, like in all of this, is us, and that's what is being mirrored at us. Is that the twin flames thing isn't the magic? We're the magic. It's just showing us where we're out of alignment with that. So how can we take this information and move forward and use it for our good? And this is where developing your self-concept, practicing your self-care routines, if you're moving out of old patterns, old ways of thinking and believing, what kind of tools and techniques can you use to help you with that? That's why your self-care routine and rituals is really important, because it reinforces, it helps you reinforce your self-concept. So I do have a free ebook on my website. Go to the Get Started page. My website's evolvedchit.com. And I have it's called the 7-Day Mindset Reset. I'm actually rewriting it right now to make it a little more robust and talk about self-concept and self-care. But right now there's a lot of good information in there that'll get you started. So practice those exercises on developing your self-concept. And what I found is, because the twin flame stuff is usually triggering this, it's because we're seeking a romantic connection. So what helped me early on in this process was I developed like what was important to me in this kind of connection that I sought with my twin flame. Like, what's this romantic connection? So I got clear on that. And when, that wasn't showing up, I could still interact with him because I love him and I love spending time with him, but when it wasn't showing up the way I wanted, I was like, I can't go down that path because this is just where we are right now. And that's what I told Ed too. I was like, a lot of this is just energy, and it needs to just, run its course. And whether Ed ends up with his twin flame or he ends up with someone else, like he's going to be better for the experience, because he's able to see where like his old narrative, which was victimizing him, was keeping him in like lower vibrational situations and unhealthy relationship dynamics. So now he's, more clear on who he is and feeling more secure about that knowledge. He can use these tools to help him see where, if his twin flame comes in, if it's not in alignment with the kind of connection that he's seeking, he can still have this friendship with her, but he doesn't have to go down this other path, and he can stop victimizing himself. It's also, again, going back to the whole, like, the twin flame interaction is like a dopamine hit. It really can feel like probably like a drug. So in some ways, like, that energy is very addicting. So spending some time in practicing mindfulness and even doing a little bit of meditating, it helps us see where, where the mind, body, soul connection kind of interacts. So as the soul, we can observe. And, when people say, well, I can't meditate because I can't meditate because I can't shut off my thoughts. And it's like, that's not always the point of meditation, is shutting off your thoughts. It's to become aware of them, because it's just the computer. So imagine when you're in meditation and the thoughts are going, it's kind of like one of those old school screensavers that you could put like a quote on and it would just, flash on the screen. You can just observe it. Do you see a pattern? Do you see something in your thoughts that you want to address? Or is it just old stuff and you're like, oh, that's just old stuff. Why am I believing that anymore? I don't think that way anymore. That's an opportunity to rewire that and change that, flip that thought. That's not who I am. Nope, I don't think that way about relationships anymore. I don't think this way about this anymore. I don't feel this way about my blah, blah, blah anymore. So this is where practicing mindfulness and meditation, even just 10 minutes twice a day, like do it in the morning when you wake up, just sit up on your bed or in a chair, be comfortable. It actually can be energizing because it allows you to sort through the noise. You'd be like, yeah, I have those thoughts because it's just my stupid shit, but I can put that over here. Or it helps you also see what you need to prioritize, because if there are important things going on in your life, sometimes our trauma can cloud what we really need to be focusing on because we're afraid of it or we're worried or anxious or whatever. So practicing like mindfulness and meditation just briefly a couple times a day can be really helpful in letting you see what are really constructive thoughts and things that we do need to act upon versus noise. So I definitely recommend doing that too when you're developing your self-concept and your self-care routine. So as always, check out the description and the pinned comment, putting resources in there that I hope are helpful for you that I use. And then also check out my website to read the blog posts. I share my personal experiences about my emotions and how I work through them and what kind of tools and techniques that I use to do that. So a lot of it is mindfulness, self-concept, and developing self-care routines. So surprise, because that's what I talk about all the time. So, but seriously, it's what has helped me a lot. And I've used this to help other people too, bring in more amazing shit into their life. So if you are someone who would like to connect with me for a coaching session, I would love to talk to you. I'm offering 30 and 60-minute sessions, and I have a special offer going on right now through the end of the year. So visit the resources or the Get Started page on my website, and you'll see the link to purchase a session. So we'll talk about what's going on in your world, what kind of blocks you might have, and talk through those and come up with, work on your self-concept and come up with a plan of action like your self-care routine so you can continue to balance that energy and work through the noise and magnetize more amazing shit into your life, because that's what we're here to do. So step into your power. That's why I yell it at the end of every video. So one other thing, actually, just wanted to add here is how long are you going to have to manage this energy? Probably for the rest of your life. So, and I think that's just a fact, but it changes. It evolves. So things that bothered me 4 years ago, like I can look back on those things and I'm like, those are things that bothered me 4 years ago. They are not things that bother me now. Now I have other things, new things that have come up that bother me and I have to work through. But I've worked through a lot of the stuff like from the early years, if you will, on my twin flames journey. For me, I was triggered by all this stuff in 2017. So, I've been reading about this and this content for a long time. So, so if I look back on where I was then, I am nowhere near where I was then. And, I love who I was at that point in my life and how I showed up and what I was doing and everything. I really have a lot of gratitude for that person. She was very brave, and that era of me decided the way I was living my life was not working, and I'm so grateful that that person made that choice. So when we look back on these different phases of who we are and how we grow and evolve and learn, can we have gratitude for how we showed up in that era, and then also celebrate what point we are in our lives now. So we're always going to be managing our energy because life is constantly ebbing and flowing, and that is a part of the human experience and what we came here to do. So to answer that other question of how long am I going to have to manage my energy, we're always managing our energy, but how are you choosing to manage it? And it's that simple. So developing your self-concept, having your self-care routines and rituals, those are the things that help us maintain in a higher vibration. So when things do come up that get us sideways, we have we have ourselves, and we're able to move through things a little more fluidly, hopefully. So that's how long you're going to have to manage the energy for. So I hope this was helpful. And just a reminder that you are loved, you are amazing, you are awesome, you are necessary, and you are really freaking needed right now. So step into your power. Until next time, I'm sending you lots of love and good vibes for your journey. Bye.